I never imagined that installing a geothermal heating system in my Denver, Colorado home would turn into a legal nightmare. But when Patricia Schneider from the HOA board knocked on my door demanding free heat, I knew my peaceful suburban life was about to implode. My name is Warren Quincy, and I had just finished the final inspection on my new geothermal system. The installation had cost me nearly $45,000, but the long-term benefits were undeniable. Colorado winters are brutal, and my energy bills had been climbing every year. The geothermal system would pay for itself in about 8 years, and more importantly, I would have excess heating capacity that I could legally sell to neighbors through a private micro-utility agreement. The neighborhood I lived in, Sunset Ridge Estates, was one of those cookie-cutter developments built in the early 2000s. Every house looked similar, with minor variations in paint color and landscaping. The HOA had always been relatively benign until about 2 years ago when Patricia became the board president. She was 53, had short blonde hair with aggressive highlights, and drove a white Lexus SUV with a "Live, Laugh, Love" bumper sticker. She wore oversized sunglasses even indoors and had perfected the art of the condescending smile. I was in my garage organizing tools when Patricia appeared at the open door, clipboard in hand. She did not knock or announce herself, just walked right in like she owned the place. "Warren, we need to talk about your new heating system," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. I set down my wrench and turned to face her. "What about it? I got all the necessary permits and the installation meets every code requirement. The inspector signed off yesterday." "Yes, well, that's not the issue." She tapped her pen against the clipboard. "The board has been discussing your system, and we believe it would be beneficial for the community if you shared your heat with the surrounding homes, specifically my house and the 3 other board members' houses." I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. When none came, I realized she was serious. "You want me to heat your houses?" "Exactly. Your system has excess capacity, and as members of this community, we should share resources. It's only fair. Fair would be you paying for the heat you use. I can set up a metered system and charge you the market rate, which would actually be lower than what you are paying now for natural gas." Patricia's smile vanished. "We are not paying for heat. The HOA bylaws state that homeowners must contribute to the community welfare. Your heating system qualifies as a community resource." I could not believe what I was hearing. "Show me where in the bylaws it says that." She flipped through papers on her clipboard, though I suspected it was just for show. Section 12. Paragraph 4 states that any homeowner with resources that could benefit the community must make those resources available when requested by the board. That section refers to things like lending a ladder for community maintenance or allowing access to your yard for utility repairs. It doesn't mean I have to give away $45,000 worth of heating equipment. The board interprets it differently. Then the board is wrong. I paid for this system with my own money. If you want heat from it, you pay market rate. Actually, I will give you a 15% discount because we are neighbors. That's my contribution to the community." Patricia's face flushed red. "You are being incredibly selfish. Do you know how much I do for this neighborhood? I organize the summer barbecue. I make sure everyone's lawn is up to code. I send out reminder emails about trash day. And this is how you repay me. I never asked you to do any of those things. The barbecue is optional. Lawn codes are in the bylaws that everyone follows, and the trash day emails are often wrong because you keep sending them on the wrong weeks." She took a step closer, her voice dropping to a threatening whisper. "You will provide free heat to the board members, or there will be consequences." "Are you threatening me?" "I am informing you of reality. The board has the authority to fine homeowners for violations. We can make your life very difficult. Fine me for what? I have not violated anything. We will find something. We always do. She turned and walked away, her heels clicking on the concrete driveway. I stood there for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. This was extortion, plain and simple. I went inside and immediately called my lawyer, Rick Henderson. Rick had handled my real estate closing when I bought the house, and I trusted him to give me straight advice. "Warren, that's absolutely not how HOA bylaws work," Rick said after I explained the situation. Section 12 is a standard cooperation clause. It has nothing to do with private property improvements. You are under no obligation to provide free anything. So what do? Document everything. Keep records of all interactions with Patricia and the board. If they start issuing fines, we will fight them. In the meantime, go ahead with your plan to offer heat at market rate to your neighbors who want it. You have every legal right to do that. I thanked Rick and spent the rest of the evening setting up my micro-utility business. Colorado has progressive laws about private energy sharing, and I had already filed all the necessary paperwork with the state. I drafted a simple contract for neighbors who wanted to connect to my geothermal system. The rate I was charging was about 20% less than current natural gas prices, and I would handle all maintenance and monitoring. The next morning, I printed out flyers and walked around the neighborhood, dropping them in mailboxes. Several neighbors were immediately interested. Tom and Linda Chen from 3 houses down came over that afternoon. "This is amazing," Tom said, looking over the contract. "Our heating bill last winter was almost $400 a month during the cold snaps. Your rate would save us about $80 a month. And it's completely green energy," Linda added. "We have been wanting to reduce our carbon footprint." "The installation will take about a week per house," I explained. "I have to run underground lines from my system to yours, install a heat exchanger in your basement, and set up the monitoring equipment. My contractor is licensed and insured, and everything will be done to code." They signed immediately. Over the next 3 days, I got 6 more families signed up. None of them were board members, which did not surprise me. Patricia had probably told them all not to participate. On Thursday evening, I was grilling burgers in my backyard when Patricia appeared at my fence gate. She did not wait for an invitation, just opened the gate and marched across my lawn. "You need to stop this immediately," she said, waving one of my flyers in my face. "Stop what? Running a legal business. You are creating a private utility within HOA property. That requires board approval." "No, it does not. I checked with my lawyer and the county. I am running lines from my property to other properties with the owner's permission. The HOA has no jurisdiction over private agreements between homeowners. Everything in this neighborhood is HOA business. You cannot just do whatever you want." "Actually, I can, as long as I am not violating any bylaws or covenants, and I am not." Patricia pulled out her phone and started typing furiously. "We are calling an emergency board meeting. You will be required to attend and explain yourself." "Fine. When?" "Tomorrow night, 7 o'clock at my house. I will be there with my lawyer." Her eyes widened. "You do not need a lawyer for an HOA meeting. If you are going to accuse me of violations, then yes, I do." She stormed off without another word. I finished grilling my burgers, but my appetite was gone. This situation was escalating faster than I had expected. Rick agreed to come to the meeting. We arrived at Patricia's house at 7 sharp. Her home was exactly what I expected. Lots of decorative pillows, motivational signs on the walls, and everything in shades of beige and white. The other 3 board members were already there. Robert Kincaid, who was 60 and retired from banking, Susan Garrett, 45 and a real estate agent, and Michael Torres, 38 and some kind of consultant. We all sat around Patricia's dining room table. She had printed out copies of the HOA bylaws for everyone, with certain sections highlighted in yellow. "Let's get started," Patricia said, calling the meeting to order. "Warren is here to answer questions about his unauthorized utility operation." "It's not unauthorized," Rick interjected. "My client has followed all state and local regulations. He does not need HOA permission to operate a private micro-utility. This HOA has rules about business operations within the community," Robert said, reading from his copy of the bylaws. "Section 18 clearly states that no homeowner shall operate a commercial enterprise from their residence without board approval." "My client is not operating a commercial enterprise," Rick responded. "He is selling excess heating capacity to willing neighbors. This falls under Colorado's distributed energy resources laws, which supersede HOA regulations." "That's ridiculous," Patricia snapped. "HOAs have authority over all property within their jurisdiction." "No, they do not," Rick said calmly. "HOAs are bound by state and federal law. You cannot prevent a homeowner from exercising their legal rights, and Colorado specifically allows private energy sharing agreements." Susan leaned forward. "What if we argue that the underground pipes he is installing constitute a modification to common property?" "The pipes run entirely through individual homeowners' properties," I said. "I am not touching common areas. My contractor mapped out the routes specifically to avoid that issue." "We should be able to fine him for something," Michael muttered. "And that's where you would get into legal trouble," Rick said. "Issuing arbitrary fines as retaliation is against the law. If you fine my client without a legitimate bylaw violation, we will sue the board for harassment and abuse of authority." The room went silent. Patricia's face was bright red now, and I could see her jaw clenching. "This is not over," she said finally. "We will be consulting with the HOA attorney." "Please do," Rick replied. "I look forward to speaking with them." We left shortly after. As Rick and I walked back to our cars, he gave me a warning. "This woman is going to be a problem. Board presidents like her hate losing control. Document everything, and I mean everything. Save every email, record conversations if Colorado's one-party consent law allows, and take photos of your property regularly. You think she'll try something? I know she will. I have dealt with dozens of HOA disputes, and they always follow the same pattern. When people realize they cannot win legally, they start playing dirty." Rick was right. The next morning, I woke up to find a violation notice taped to my front door. According to Patricia, my lawn was 3/4 of an inch above the allowed maximum height of 2.5 inches. The fine was $50, with an additional $50 per day until the violation was corrected. I went outside and measured my lawn. It was exactly 2.25 inches. I took photos with a ruler clearly visible, time-stamped them, and emailed them to the entire board with Rick copied. 2 days later, another violation notice appeared. This time, I was accused of having visible garbage cans outside of designated pickup times. The problem was, my garbage cans were in my garage. I had not put them out for collection yet. More photos, more emails to Rick. The harassment continued for 2 weeks. I received violation notices for everything imaginable. My house number was allegedly too small. My mailbox was the wrong shade of black. My garden hose was visible from the street. Every single complaint was either false or absurdly petty. I documented everything and forwarded it all to Rick. Meanwhile, my heating business was thriving. The contractor finished the first installation at the Chen house, and Tom called me the day after we fired up the system. "Warren, this is incredible. The heat is so consistent and comfortable. And silent. We do not hear anything running." More neighbors signed up. Within a month, I had 12 houses connected, with 4 more scheduled for installation. The additional income was nice, but more than that, I enjoyed helping my neighbors save money and reduce their carbon footprint. Then Patricia escalated things. I came home from work one Wednesday to find a certified letter from the HOA attorney, a firm called Davidson and Associates. The letter demanded that I cease all heating operations immediately, or face legal action for operating an unauthorized utility, violating community covenants, and creating a private monopoly within the neighborhood. I called Rick immediately. He asked me to bring the letter to his office the next morning. "This is all nonsense," Rick said, reading through the legal threats. "Their attorney is either incompetent or Patricia fed them false information. You are not operating an unauthorized utility because private micro-utilities are legal in Colorado. You are not violating community covenants because energy sharing is not mentioned in your covenants. And you are definitely not creating a monopoly because neighbors are free to use whatever heating source they want. So what do? We respond in kind. I am going to draft a letter explaining that their claims are baseless and that any legal action against you will result in a countersuit for harassment, abuse of process, and legal fees. We are also going to demand that they cease issuing fraudulent violation notices." Rick's letter went out that Friday. The following Monday, I received a call from an unknown number. When I answered, a man's voice introduced himself as Peter Davidson from Davidson and Associates. "Mr. Quincy, I am calling because I have reviewed your case more thoroughly, and I need to ask you some questions. My lawyer advised me not to speak with opposing counsel directly. I understand, but I want to clarify something. The information we were provided by the HOA board may have been incomplete. Can you tell me if you actually received all required permits for your geothermal system?" "Yes, I can send you copies if needed." "Please do. And you have been documenting the violation notices you have been receiving?" "Every single one, with photographic evidence proving they are false." There was a long pause. "Mr. Quincy, I am going to be honest with you. If what you are telling me is accurate, the HOA board may have misrepresented the situation to my firm. I need to review your documentation before we proceed with any legal action." I sent him everything that afternoon: permits, inspection reports, photos of the false violations, copies of the Colorado energy sharing laws, and Rick's previous correspondence. 2 days later, Rick called me with news. Davidson and Associates has withdrawn from representing the HOA board. Apparently, Peter Davidson realized Patricia was using his firm to harass you, and he did not appreciate being misled. So it's over. Not quite. The board can hire another attorney, but most legitimate firms will see through Patricia's nonsense. However, that also means she might get desperate. Rick's warning proved prophetic. The next week, I came home to find that someone had filed a complaint with the county building inspector, claiming my geothermal system was not up to code and posed a safety hazard. The inspector showed up unannounced and demanded to examine my installation. Fortunately, everything was perfect. The inspector found no violations and even complimented the quality of the work. He told me that the complaint had been filed anonymously, but contained very specific details about my property, suggesting it came from someone in the neighborhood. I knew it was Patricia, but I could not prove it. The harassment continued through the summer. Someone reported my car to the HOA for having a small dent in the bumper, claiming it violated the prohibition on parking damaged vehicles in driveways. Someone else claimed my dog was barking constantly, even though I did not own a dog. The complaints were increasingly absurd, but each one required time and energy to refute. My connected neighbors started experiencing harassment too. The Chen family received a violation notice for their new heat exchanger unit, claiming it was an unauthorized external modification. Susan Garrett, ironically the board member who seemed least invested in Patricia's vendetta, actually voted against that violation, creating the first crack in the board's unity. In August, Patricia made her biggest mistake. She organized a community meeting without informing me or any of the families connected to my heating system. At that meeting, she proposed a special assessment of $5,000 per household to fund a community heating initiative that would install a central system for the entire neighborhood. The catch was that homeowners already using my system would still have to pay the assessment, but would be required to disconnect from my system. One of my customers, Rachel Morrison, recorded the entire meeting on her phone. She sent me the video that night. Watching Patricia present her proposal was infuriating. She claimed my system was unsafe, untested, and that I was profiting unfairly from my neighbors. She said the board had a responsibility to protect homeowners from predatory private utilities. She even suggested that I might be violating price gouging laws, which was completely false. Several homeowners at the meeting pushed back. Tom Chen stood up and explained how much money his family was saving and how well the system worked. Another neighbor, James Hartford, pointed out that a $5,000 assessment was far more than most families would spend on heating over several years. Patricia dismissed their concerns. The board knows what is best for this community. We will be holding a vote in 2 weeks. Rick watched the video and immediately sprang into action. She just handed us a gift. That meeting violated Colorado HOA laws in multiple ways. First, she did not provide proper notice to all homeowners. Second, she presented a special assessment without the required financial documentation. Third, she made defamatory statements about you and your business. We are going to shut this down hard. Rick filed an injunction with the county court to prevent the special assessment vote. He also sent a cease and desist letter to Patricia personally, warning her that her defamatory statements could result in a lawsuit. The injunction hearing was scheduled for early September. I took a day off work to attend. Patricia showed up with a new lawyer, a solo practitioner named Gary Hoffman who looked barely out of law school. Rick later told me that Hoffman was known for taking cases that other attorneys would not touch. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s named Judge Elizabeth Freeman, reviewed the case materials before the hearing even started. When we sat down, she looked directly at Patricia. "Mrs. Schneider, I have reviewed the notice requirements for HOA meetings, and it appears you failed to provide adequate notice to all homeowners." "Is that correct?" Patricia stammered. We posted a notice on the community bulletin board. The law requires written notice sent to each homeowner's address of record at least 10 days before any meeting involving financial matters. Did you do that? I sent an email to the neighborhood listserv. That does not satisfy the requirement. The law specifies written notice, which means physical mail or an email sent to each individual homeowner with confirmation of receipt. A general listserv post is insufficient. Gary Hoffman tried to argue that the board had acted in good faith, but Judge Freeman was not having it. She granted the injunction, blocking the special assessment vote and ordering the board to follow proper procedures if they wanted to pursue any community-wide initiatives in the future. Furthermore, Judge Freeman added. I am troubled by the allegations of harassment and false violation notices. Mr. Quincy, if you have evidence of these actions, I suggest you file a formal complaint with the county. Rick and I left the courthouse feeling victorious, but I knew Patricia would not let this go. She had been publicly humiliated, and people like her did not take that well. I was right. 2 days after the hearing, I woke up at 3 in the morning to my security system alarm blaring. I rushed downstairs to find my front windows covered in spray paint. Someone had written "thief" and "crook" across my windows in bright red paint. I called the police immediately. The responding officers took photos and a report. The paint had gotten on my front door and siding too. The damage estimate was over $2,000. The officers canvassed the neighborhood but found no witnesses. However, my security cameras had captured footage of someone approaching my house. The person was wearing dark clothes and a hood, making identification difficult, but the video showed them getting out of a white SUV parked down the street. Patricia drove a white Lexus SUV. I sent the footage to the police and to Rick. Rick advised me to also file for a restraining order against Patricia based on the months of harassment, and now this potential vandalism. The restraining order hearing was scheduled for late September. I brought all my documentation: the false violation notices, the video from the community meeting, the security camera footage, and statements from neighbors who had witnessed Patricia's behavior. Patricia showed up with Gary Hoffman again. She denied everything, claiming she was being unfairly targeted because she had tried to protect the community from my illegal business operations. Judge Freeman was the same judge from the injunction hearing, and she clearly remembered the case. After reviewing my evidence, she granted a temporary restraining order, prohibiting Patricia from coming within 100 feet of me or my property, and from contacting me directly or indirectly. Mrs. Schneider, your behavior as described in these documents is completely inappropriate for an HOA board president, Judge Freeman said. If even half of these allegations are true, you have been abusing your authority to harass a homeowner over a personal dispute. This court will not tolerate that. Patricia started to protest, but the judge cut her off. If you violate this restraining order, you will be arrested. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor, Patricia said quietly. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. 3 weeks later, I received a notice that an emergency HOA board meeting had been called to vote on my expulsion from the community. Apparently, there was a clause in the bylaws allowing the board to force a homeowner to sell their property if they were deemed to be causing harm to the community. Rick immediately filed a motion to block the meeting, arguing that Patricia's involvement violated the restraining order since any board action against me constituted indirect contact. The judge agreed and issued an order prohibiting the board from taking any action related to me while Patricia remained as president. This created a stalemate. Patricia refused to resign, but the board could not take any actions against me. Meanwhile, my heating business continued to grow. By November, I had 18 houses connected, and the cold weather was proving the system's value. My customers were thrilled with their lower bills and consistent heat. The situation finally broke in December. Susan Garrett, the real estate agent on the board, called me unexpectedly. "Warren, I need to talk to you off the record," she said. "Can we meet somewhere private?" We met at a coffee shop in downtown Denver, far from the neighborhood. Susan looked exhausted. "Patricia is losing it," she said. "She is obsessed with shutting down your heating system. She spent hours at the last board meeting ranting about you. Robert and Michael are getting uncomfortable with the whole situation. Why are they still supporting her then? Because she is intimidating. She keeps detailed files on everyone in the neighborhood, looking for anything she can use as leverage. When Robert suggested maybe we should just leave you alone, she reminded him that his daughter's boyfriend has been staying at his house for 3 months, which technically violates the guest policy. That's insane. It gets worse. I think she is the one who vandalized your house. She was bragging to me about how you would never be able to prove it, but she practically admitted it. Would you be willing to testify to that? Susan hesitated. If it comes to that, yes, but I am hoping we can resolve this another way. I am going to call for a vote to remove Patricia as board president. I have been talking to other homeowners, and there is enough support to force a special election. Once she is off the board, this will all stop. What can I do to help? Just keep your head down and do not give her any ammunition. The vote is going to happen in January. I thanked Susan and went home feeling hopeful for the first time in months, but Patricia was not done yet. On December 23rd, 2 days before Christmas, I came home to find police cars in front of my house. My heart sank as I pulled into my driveway. An officer approached me immediately. "Mr. Quincy, I am Officer Davis. We received a report that you have been making threats against Patricia Schneider. We need to ask you some questions. I have a restraining order against her. I have not contacted her at all. She claims you have been sending threatening emails from anonymous accounts." I felt my stomach drop. "I have not sent her any emails. Can I see the emails she is talking about?" Officer Davis showed me his phone. There were 3 emails sent from a Proton Mail account, each containing vague threats about getting what's coming to her and watching her back. The emails were poorly written and obviously fake, but they were concerning enough that the police had to investigate. "Officer, I did not send these. I have a lawyer who has been handling all interactions with Mrs. Schneider. I can provide you with his contact information and my own email records to prove I did not send these. We will need to take your computer and phone for analysis. Of course, whatever you need, but I am telling you I did not send these emails. Mrs. Schneider has been harassing me for months, and this is just another attempt to get back at me." The investigation took 2 weeks. During that time, I had to use a borrowed laptop for work, which was incredibly inconvenient. But the forensic analysis proved what I already knew. The emails did not come from any of my devices, and the Proton Mail account had been created from an IP address that traced back to a public library in downtown Denver. The police cleared me of any wrongdoing, but the incident left me shaken. Patricia was willing to file false police reports to harass me. This had gone way beyond HOA disputes. Rick filed a police report against Patricia for filing a false complaint. He also amended the restraining order request to make it permanent and added a civil lawsuit for defamation, harassment, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The special election to remove Patricia was held in mid-January 2025. Susan had done an excellent job rallying support. Over 70% of the homeowners voted to remove Patricia as board president. She was also voted off the board entirely by a similar margin. Patricia did not take it well. At the meeting where the results were announced, she stood up and screamed at the assembled homeowners, calling them ungrateful and stupid. She specifically pointed at me and said, "This is all your fault. You have poisoned this community against me." Security had to escort her out of the building. Robert Kincaid was elected as the new board president. His first act was to send a formal apology to me on behalf of the board, acknowledging that I had been treated unfairly and that all previous violation notices were rescinded. But Patricia still was not finished. In February, she filed a lawsuit against me in civil court, claiming that my heating system had decreased her property value and demanding $100,000 in damages. Gary Hoffman was her attorney again. Rick was almost gleeful when he showed me the lawsuit. "This is the worst legal filing I have seen in years. She has no evidence, no expert testimony, and no legal basis for her claims. We are going to destroy this in court." The case went to trial in April 2025. Patricia testified that my heating system was an eyesore and that the underground pipes had damaged the neighborhood's aesthetic value. She could not provide any evidence of actual property value decrease, and when Rick cross-examined her, she fell apart. "Mrs. Schneider, is it true that you demanded Mr. Quincy provide free heating to your home?" Rick asked. "I suggested it would be a community benefit, and when he refused, you began issuing false violation notices." "They were not false. His lawn was too long." Rick presented the photos I had taken showing my lawn was well within the allowed height. "These photos show otherwise. Can you explain this discrepancy?" Patricia stammered. Maybe I measured wrong." "Did you vandalize Mr. Quincy's house in September?" "No. I already told the police I did not do that." "But you told Susan Garrett that Mr. Quincy would never be able to prove you did it. Why would you say that if you were not involved?" Gary Hoffman objected, but the damage was done. The jury could see that Patricia was lying. Rick then called several of my customers to testify about how the heating system had actually improved the neighborhood by reducing noise from furnaces and eliminating unsightly outdoor AC units. He presented evidence that property values in the neighborhood had increased slightly since my system came online, likely because buyers were attracted to the lower heating costs. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before ruling in my favor. They not only dismissed Patricia's claims, but awarded me $25,000 in legal fees and damages for the harassment I had endured. But the real vindication came a week later. Susan Garrett called me with news that Patricia was being investigated by the police for the vandalism of my house. Apparently, after the trial, Susan had provided her statement about Patricia's admission, and the police had obtained surveillance footage from a neighbor's camera that showed Patricia's Lexus SUV parked near my house on the night of the vandalism. Patricia was arrested in early May 2025 and charged with criminal mischief and filing a false police report. The false report charge related to the fake threatening emails she had allegedly sent to herself to frame me. The criminal trial was scheduled for August. I attended every day of proceedings. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence. The surveillance footage, Susan's testimony, forensic analysis of Patricia's computer showing she had created the Proton Mail account and sent the emails to herself, and testimony from multiple neighbors about her increasingly erratic behavior. Patricia's defense was that she had been under extreme stress and had made poor decisions, but she maintained she had not vandalized my house. The jury did not believe her. She was convicted on all counts. The judge sentenced her to 90 days in jail, 3 years of probation, and ordered her to pay full restitution for the damage to my house plus court costs. She was also permanently banned from serving on any HOA board in Colorado. As Patricia was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, she glared at me with pure hatred. I felt no satisfaction, only exhaustion. This entire ordeal had consumed nearly 1.5 years of my life. In the months that followed, life in Sunset Ridge Estates slowly returned to normal. Robert Kincaid proved to be an excellent board president, focused on actual community issues rather than personal vendettas. The HOA even passed a resolution officially supporting alternative energy initiatives, with several more neighbors expressing interest in connecting to my geothermal system. By September 2025, I had 25 houses connected. The system was running flawlessly, and my customers were saving an average of $75 per month on heating costs. Some of them had started calling me a neighborhood hero, which felt absurd given that I was just running a small business. Tom Chen organized a block party in October to celebrate the end of what everyone now referred to as the Patricia era. It was a beautiful fall afternoon, and nearly every household showed up. Kids played in the street, people grilled burgers and hot dogs, and for the first time in over a year, I felt like I was part of a real community. Susan approached me near the end of the party. "I am sorry I did not speak up sooner," she said. "I should have stood up to Patricia months before I did." "You did the right thing when it mattered," I replied. "That's what counts. Still, I feel guilty. She made all of our lives miserable, but you bore the brunt of it. It's over now. Let's just move forward." In December, I received notification that Patricia had been released from jail after serving 60 days of her 90-day sentence with good behavior. She had apparently moved out of the neighborhood entirely, selling her house at a loss just to get away. The new owners were a young couple with a toddler, and they were delighted to learn about the geothermal heating option. They signed up immediately. Rick and I met for drinks in early January 2026 to mark the 2-year anniversary of when this whole nightmare had started. We sat at a bar in downtown Denver, watching snow fall outside the windows. "You know, I have been practicing law for 15 years, and your case was one of the most ridiculous I have ever seen," Rick said. "The amount of energy Patricia spent trying to get free heat from you was insane. She could have just paid your rate and saved money." "It was never about the money," I replied. "It was about control. She needed to feel like she was in charge, and when I did not submit to her authority, she could not handle it. Well, she certainly paid a price." Criminal record, civil judgment against her, banned from HOA service. Her life is ruined over this. She ruined it herself. I just wanted to heat my house and help my neighbors. We toasted to surviving the ordeal and to better days ahead. As I drove home that night through the snowy streets of Denver, I reflected on everything that had happened. The experience had been frustrating, expensive, and at times genuinely frightening. But it had also taught me valuable lessons about standing up for myself, the importance of good legal counsel, and the power of community when people come together against bullying. My geothermal system continued to run perfectly, quietly pumping heat to 26 houses in Sunset Ridge Estates. Every month, those families saved money and reduced their carbon footprint. I had turned a profit on my investment much faster than anticipated, and I was already planning to expand the system if more neighbors wanted to join. Patricia Schneider's attempt to extort free heat from me had backfired spectacularly. Instead of crushing me, she had inadvertently helped me build a successful business and brought the community closer together. The irony was not lost on me. As I pulled into my driveway that night, I noticed my house was warm and welcoming, light glowing from the windows. The geothermal system was doing its job perfectly, as it always did. I thought about Patricia sitting in her new home somewhere else, probably still bitter and angry about how things had turned out. I felt a moment of pity for her. She had let her need for control consume her entire life, and in the end, she had lost everything she had tried to protect. But that was the thing about people like Patricia. They could never see that their own actions were the problem. It was always someone else's fault. I went inside, made myself dinner, and spent the evening watching a movie. Tomorrow, I had an installation starting at the Morrison house down the street. 3 more families had signed up just this week. Life was good. The HOA board under Robert's leadership had become a model of reasonable governance. They focused on actual community needs like maintaining common areas, organizing social events that people actually enjoyed, and ensuring that community standards were enforced fairly and consistently. The difference from Patricia's reign was like night and day. In February 2026, I attended my first HOA board meeting in over a year. I had been invited to present an update on the geothermal system and answer any questions from homeowners. The meeting was held at the community center, and about 40 people showed up. I explained how the system worked, shared data on energy savings, and discussed the environmental benefits. The presentation was well received, with many people asking thoughtful questions about capacity, maintenance costs, and future expansion possibilities. At the end, Robert stood up and addressed the room. I want to take a moment to acknowledge Warren's patience and perseverance over the past 2 years. He had every right to be angry with this community after how he was treated, but instead, he has continued to be a positive force for change. That says a lot about his character. The room burst into applause. I felt my face flush with embarrassment, but I appreciated the recognition. It had been a long, difficult road, and it felt good to be acknowledged. After the meeting, several more homeowners approached me about connecting to the system. I was going to need to hire additional help to keep up with demand. The problem was becoming not whether people wanted to join, but whether my system had enough capacity to serve everyone. I started consulting with engineers about expanding the geothermal field. With the proper permits and investment, I could potentially serve up to 50 houses. The upfront cost would be substantial, but the long-term payoff was clear. I began working on a business plan for the expansion, including the possibility of bringing in investors or applying for green energy grants from the state. In March, I received a letter from the state of Colorado. They had learned about my micro-utility through a local news article one of my neighbors had sent to the paper, and they wanted to feature my system as a case study in distributed renewable energy. A team from the Colorado Energy Office visited my house, toured the facilities, and interviewed several of my customers. The resulting report was published in May and highlighted my system as an innovative model for community-based renewable energy. The publicity brought even more interest, not just from my neighborhood but from other communities around Colorado. I started receiving calls from homeowners in Aurora, Colorado Springs, and Fort Collins asking how they could set up similar systems. I never set out to become a renewable energy entrepreneur. I just wanted to heat my house efficiently and maybe help a few neighbors save money. But Patricia's attempt to extort free heat from me had inadvertently launched me into a new career path. By summer 2026, I had incorporated my micro-utility as a proper business, hired 2 full-time employees, and was consulting with 3 other neighborhoods on setting up their own geothermal networks. The business was growing faster than I had ever imagined possible. I thought about Patricia occasionally, wondering what she was doing and whether she had learned anything from the experience. Probably not. People like her rarely did. They just moved on to the next situation where they could try to assert control over others. But her legacy lived on in an unexpected way. The story of what had happened in Sunset Ridge Estates became a cautionary tale in HOA management circles throughout Colorado. Several HOA management companies used my case as an example of what not to do in their training programs. Patricia Schneider had become synonymous with HOA board overreach and abuse of power. In August, Robert called to tell me that the HOA was updating their bylaws to include specific protections for homeowners pursuing renewable energy projects. The new language explicitly stated that the board could not prevent or unduly restrict homeowners from installing solar panels, geothermal systems, or other approved alternative energy systems. It was a direct response to Patricia's actions, ensuring that no one else would face the same harassment I had endured. The changes were put to a vote at the annual meeting in September. They passed unanimously. Life settled into a comfortable routine. My heating business ran smoothly, the neighborhood was peaceful, and I had even started dating a woman named Fiona Miller, who coincidentally was an environmental lawyer. We had met at a green energy conference where I was speaking about distributed renewable systems. She found my story fascinating and was impressed by how I had stood up to Patricia's bullying. Fiona had dealt with similar situations in her legal practice and shared stories of other homeowners fighting HOA boards over solar panels and wind turbines. It seemed like the conflict between traditional HOA governance and renewable energy was a growing issue across the country. The problem is that HOAs were designed for a different era, Fiona explained over dinner one night. They were about maintaining property values through conformity and aesthetic control. But we are living in a time where environmental concerns and energy independence are becoming priorities. The two mindsets clash. You think things will change. They have to. State legislatures are starting to pass laws limiting HOA authority over renewable energy. California and Colorado are leading the way, but other states will follow. Eventually, HOAs will have to adapt or become irrelevant. I hoped she was right. My experience with Patricia had shown me how much damage a single person with unchecked authority could do. But it had also shown me that communities could come together to fix problems when enough people were willing to stand up. In October 2026, almost 2 years after Patricia's arrest, I received an unexpected phone call. It was Gary Hoffman, Patricia's former attorney. "Mr. Quincy, I know we were on opposite sides, but I wanted to reach out to you about something," he said. "I am working on a book about HOA conflicts, and I would like to include your case as a chapter. Would you be willing to be interviewed?" I was skeptical. "Why would you want to write about a case where your side lost?" "Because it is an important story. I made mistakes representing Patricia. I should have pushed back harder when she wanted me to pursue baseless claims. I was young and needed the work, but I compromised my ethics. Your case taught me a lot about being a better attorney." "What happened to Patricia? Have you stayed in touch?" "She moved to Wyoming. Last I heard, she was working as a property manager for a storage facility. She is not involved with any HOAs anymore, which is probably for the best." I agreed to the interview, and Gary and I met several times over the following weeks. Talking through the experience from start to finish was therapeutic in a way. I had been so focused on surviving each crisis as it happened that I had never really processed the full scope of what Patricia had put me through. Gary's book, When HOAs Go Wrong, Tales from the Front Lines of America's Neighborhood Battles, was published in spring 2027. My case took up an entire chapter titled The Geothermal War of Sunset Ridge. Gary did an excellent job presenting the facts objectively and drawing lessons about HOA governance, renewable energy rights, and the dangers of unchecked authority. The book became surprisingly popular, particularly among HOA board members looking to avoid making the same mistakes Patricia had made. I started getting invited to speak at HOA conferences and community meetings about my experience and the importance of reasonable governance. By the end of 2027, my micro-utility was serving 42 houses in Sunset Ridge estates, and I had helped establish similar systems in 5 other Colorado neighborhoods. The business was profitable, my customers were happy, and I had inadvertently become a voice for homeowners' rights in the renewable energy space. Looking back on everything that had happened, since that day Patricia walked into my garage demanding free heat, I felt a strange sense of gratitude. Not for the harassment or the stress or the legal battles, but for the way those challenges had forced me to stand up for myself and ultimately led me to a more fulfilling path. Patricia Schneider had tried to break me, but instead, she had inadvertently helped me build something meaningful. Her attempt to assert petty control over my heating system had backfired in every possible way. She had lost her position, her reputation, her freedom, and her home. Meanwhile, I had gained a successful business, a stronger community, and a sense of purpose I had never had before. The irony was perfect. Patricia had always been obsessed with maintaining control and asserting authority over others. In the end, her need for control had cost her everything, while I had thrived by focusing on helping others and standing up for what was right. I never saw Patricia again after her trial. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she had tried to join an HOA board in Wyoming, but was rejected once they learned about her criminal record. Part of me hoped she had learned something from the experience and found a healthier way to channel her energy. But I suspected she was still the same person, just with fewer opportunities to inflict her will on others. As I sit here in early 2028, writing this all down at Fiona's suggestion, I am struck by how much my life has changed in 4 years. I went from a regular homeowner with a new heating system to a small business owner, a renewable energy advocate, and apparently someone whose story is worth telling in books and at conferences. All because one HOA Karen demanded I give her free heat and then lost her mind when I said no. The experience taught me valuable lessons about the importance of documentation, the necessity of good legal counsel, and the power of standing firm when you know you are right. It also taught me that communities are stronger when governed by reason and mutual respect, rather than by petty tyrants obsessed with control. Sunset Ridge Estates is a better place now than it was under Patricia's reign. The HOA board focuses on actual community needs. Homeowners feel empowered to make improvements to their properties without fear of arbitrary punishment. And my geothermal system continues to provide clean, affordable heat to dozens of families. Sometimes I drive past Patricia's old house and think about the waste of it all. She could have simply paid market rate for heat and saved money while supporting a neighbor's business. Instead, she chose confrontation, harassment, and ultimately self-destruction. All because she could not stand the idea of not getting something for free that she felt entitled to. Her story serves as a cautionary tale, not just about HOA overreach, but about what happens when ego and entitlement override common sense and decency. I hope that somewhere, somehow, she has found peace and learned from her mistakes, but I doubt it. As for me, I am content. My business continues to grow, my relationship with Fiona is strong, and I have a community that values what I have built. The nightmare that Patricia created ultimately led to something positive and meaningful, and every time I look at my heating system, running quietly and efficiently, providing warmth to dozens of homes, I am reminded that standing up to bullies is worth it, even when it is hard. Even when it costs time and money and sleep. Because eventually the truth wins out and those who abuse their power face consequences. Patricia Schneider demanded my heat for free, then threatened a lawsuit when I charged market rate. In the end, she got neither the heat nor the lawsuit victory. She got a criminal record, a civil judgment, and permanent exile from the HOA world she had tried to dominate. And I got a successful business, a stronger community, and the satisfaction of knowing I did the right thing. I would say that is a fair trade.